So what is an overactive bladder?
An overactive bladder is one that contracts inappropriately, right, when it isn't necessarily a big volume, and unpredictably. Those people with an overactive bladder, and we'll all know them, can't hold on. They go every time they see a loo. They plan trips around toilets. They cannot resist. If they get that urge, they have to go. Otherwise, they're terrified they're going to wet themselves, and they quite possibly will. So it's a very different sort of bladder. It's not weak. It's probably got far too much activity in there. But if that's your sort of bladder or your children's bladders, the worst thing you can be doing is saying, go, go, go.
So starting with our children, what should we be teaching them?
When you go to the loo, you get that urge to go, your brain's approved, you toddle off. You sit down, the urethra, the tube out from the bladder relaxes, the pelvic floor relaxes. So what you're doing is a good wee. So if you try to make your bladder go when it doesn't want to, just because mummy said go now, we're going out, you will not get that nice coordinated contraction, relaxation that you need to get a nice good flow. Now, again, occasionally not the end of the world. But if you are consistently trying to pass urine in that way, if you think about it, if you put some sort of blockage in the way of your bladder, like a prostate, or if you're a little lab rat and I tie off your urethra because I want to experiment on you, that sounds a bit ghoulish, doesn't it?
It does.
But what I'm getting at is if you partially obstruct a bladder, the bladder's response is to fight harder, to try and overcome that obstruction. It gets more urgent, it gets more spasmy, it gets more uncoordinated. And that's what you do to someone who already has a bit of an overactive bladder if you make them go when they don't need to.
As an adult, if I have an overactive bladder, what is my response to the urge to need to wee?
You'll run, won't you?
Yes.
You'll run. So you're bouncing that bladder on top of everything else, on top of the fact it's already contracting. But you are scared. You are scared it's going to embarrass you. You've been mortified in the past. You are not going to let that happen. You will go every 20 minutes, despite the fact the bladder doesn't actually care how much is in there, and it will leak at 20 mils, it will leak at 200 mils, it may leak somewhere in between. All you're doing is making that bladder worse. Look, if you find that your bladder is controlling you, that you can't finish what you were doing, particularly if a tap's running, that you can't finish a phone call, that you can't do a particular task, you drop everything and run, your bladder is in control of you. So it's a clue that you need to start working on that.
And what can we do to take control back?
So what you need to do, you've got to look at what you're actually doing, the pattern that your bladder's in. So you need someone to work with. You need your bladder trainer, pelvic floor physiotherapist, continence nurse. You really need someone to give you that moral support. And they will look at how much you're weeing, when you're weeing, how much you're drinking, how much your bowel is part of this pattern. What is your habit with the bladder? What are all those hopelessly unproductive things you do because you're scared of leakage? And you can actually retrain that bladder. But you need to start recognising a normal urge, a very early urge, what you can sit down and cross your legs and hold on a little bit longer, even a minute. Right? Fill up that bladder that little bit more and then perhaps not go until the second time that urge hits. What you don't want is it running your life. If you know it's your bladder that's stopping you doing a whole lot of things you may want to do or places you want to go, I would get that looked into. A lot of people don't go because they'll say, oh, I mentioned it once and the doctor said it was part of ageing and I just had to put up with it. Look, we can't make it go away, but we can certainly make it better. So I would talk with your doctor. If you really find this is getting you down, talk with your doctor. Referrals, as I say, to physiotherapists or to continence nurses, look at the medication. If things are really bad, you'll need to see a specialist. But sometimes we just want things a bit easier and life a little bit more manageable, and we'll get on with it.
On the other end of the scale, is it a good thing or a bad thing to hold on for a long time?
Realistically, we would rarely hold on too long. It's just about impossible. It really is much more that people go far too frequently.